Africa colleagues, partners, and good afternoon to everybody else. Welcome to another webinar series, which is part of the AGRO's learning sessions. We continue to make AGRO a learning institution by ensuring that we continue to learn from each other on what we do, how we do it, and the effect this has on the smallholder farmers and other stakeholders. Today's presentation is by our Ghana colleagues and partners. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and the recording will be shared after the meeting. If you are joining the webinar outside of the AGRO offices, we kindly request you to indicate your name and email address in the Q&A window for our records. Also remember to type in your questions at any time the Q&A window as well. Please join me in welcoming Foster Boateng, who is the regional head for West Africa and who is the moderator for today's webinar. Over to you, Foster.
Thank you, Jane, and good morning from Ghana to all my listeners on the line and also my cherished panelists or discussants. Some of them are here with me in the AGRA conference room. Others are also taking it from the line. Yeah, today's webinar, the topic is impact of COVID-19 on agriculture in Ghana, response of the seed industry. Why are we choosing this topic? Why is this topic coming at this time? Very interesting moment, of course, for agricultural sector in West Africa and in Ghana in particular. We remember that the last quarter of February, West Africa recorded its first COVID case in Nigeria, and within a month, the virus has spread to almost about 17 countries in West Africa. For me, most countries and governments had to take sweeping measures to quickly curb the spread of the virus. But is that why we are here? No. The emphasis has been on health. But then we believe that agriculture plays a major role because come to think of it, most of our poor people who live in rural areas find their livelihoods in agriculture. But looking at the uncertainty, fear, and panic around this COVID could spark negatively impact on planting decisions, we believe, which may lead to decline in production and subsequently to inflation in food prices. Nonetheless, COVID presents opportunities for the country to boost domestic production and consumption of food commodities such as rice, maize, and the like. But Ghana can also use the opportunity to increase production and export commodities. This morning, I have with me seasoned practitioners in the seed sector. I have with me Mr. Josiah Wobel, who is the chairman of the National Seed Council, well versed in the subject. Also on the line, I have Professor Eric Dankwa, who is a plant genetic, who holds plant genetic degree from Cambridge, and he is the director of WACI. Also in the room, I have Augusta, Mrs. Augusta Clotte, who is Executive Secretary of NASDAQ, the Trade Association. And also with me, an old friend from Ministry of Food and Agriculture and the Deputy Director, Dr. Solomon Ansa, who is also joined us to share his perspective about the subject. On the line, I also have a very good friend from representing the Development Partners FAO, Benjamin Ajay, also joining us. I believe, ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be an exciting discussion. I want you to stay tuned. And for few household keeping instructions, we have 10 minutes for our key discussants. After that, the other discussants have 5 minutes to respond. And then my key discussant will pose some few questions to them. Then there will be time for Q&A also. On the line, I believe I have my president, my deputy president, and my vice president also on the line trying to join and support me. Also, I have with me our Deputy Vice President, who is a Matusala in the subject we are going to discuss. See, his name is Dr. George Bigiwa. George, if you are there, I give you the floor to make a quick remark. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Foster. Good morning, West Africa, and good afternoon to others. First of all, let me take this opportunity to thank Foster and the Ghana team for organizing this very important webinar. In the same vein, I'd like to thank the discussants for finding time to join and share the experience on this very important topic. This shows the commitment you attach to the seed industry. I would also like to thank the partnership being extended by the government and the other partners who really have been working hard together with AGRA to ensure that the seed industry in Ghana is put on the right path. I know it has been a long journey since we started in 2007. I recall there were no private seed companies then. All the seed industry work was in the hands of the government. Today, we have close to 20 private seed companies. And kudos to the government and kudos to the individuals who put aside their resources and time to establish a viable seed industry in Ghana. I recall in Ghana, we only had one open pollinated variety, Obatampa, which was being grown all over the country and it had been grown for many decades. But today, we have several maize hybrids, we have several other improved varieties in the hands of the farmers. Today, again, we have other seed companies, both regional and multinational. I know we still have a long way to go, but looking at how far we have come and where we are going, I get a strong conviction that we are on the right track and will be able to achieve what has been said. I wish to hail the partnership between the government and the private sector. This is the only way we can really put the seed industry on the strong path. I'm happy with the government interventions, and gone are the days when government institutions would look at the private sector as a predator to be shot on sight or as a cow to be overmilked. But instead today, the government, Ghana, is looking at the private sector as a horse to pull the wagon. To me, this is a very timely webinar amid this pandemic of COVID-19 to put our heads together and forge way ahead, to reflect on what to do amidst these challenges, and I'm sure we'll be able to come up with viable solutions. So I look forward to your innovative ideas, and I thank you all, and all the best.
Thank you, Uncle George. Thank you for that insightful remarks. Again, I have on the line my president, Dr. Agnes Kalibata, my vice president, Agi Kondi, and then my deputy president, Dr. Fadel Indiami, all supporting me. I'm not alone. I have a whole big team supporting me from Nairobi. Now, without much ado, I will just invite our key discussant and to give his views and give a frame today's discussion. He's no other person than Mr. Joseph Webel, a chairman of the National Seed Council, and he's well versed in the subject. I tell you, this man his experience is even more than my age, apparently. But today I have the opportunity to have him speak. Also, let me acknowledge our other partners on the line. USAID is on the line, and all other partners who are hearing me. I give the floor to Mr. Wobel to frame today's discussion. Mr. Wobel, you have the line.
Thank you very much, Foster. And let me start by greeting all colleagues here and abroad who have tuned in to this webinar. It is a pleasure to be involved in this webinar, which I'm sure is of great importance to almost all countries in Africa, because Africa is mainly populated with agricultural countries. And so the issue of seeds and how they contribute to agriculture, I'm sure, will be striking a good chord with almost everybody. Ghana is an agricultural country also, and therefore we believe that agriculture should always be so positioned that it is able to play its key role of ensuring us food and nutrition security, economic well-being at the national and household level, and also help us with our problems of youth employment. A key issue, if you want to position agriculture well, is always the issue of quality seeds. It is widely accepted. It is a universal truism that quality seeds exert profound influence on agricultural productivity, enhancing yield sometimes by as much as 20 to 25%, or even more if deployed in the context of the improved input package. And that is why, since independence, as a matter of fact, in 1958, Ghana started developing a national seed program which would be of use to our agricultural program. We have gone through several phases, mostly using the public sector institutions to produce the entirety of the classes of seed. Until recently, I would say in 2013, Ghana adopted a policy that relegated to the private sector the function of producing certified seed. Government, nevertheless, continued its partnership by ensuring that the research, regulatory, and extension aspects are still conducted with public funds as an input into the private sector activity. We have come a long way. I think you all heard George from AGRA giving a little bit of history as to the progress we have made. And today, Ghana is rapidly assuming its proper place among seed industrialist nations in Africa. Although we have a long way to go to reach the magnitude of production that we are familiar with in Southern and Eastern Africa. I would also say that recently, the advent of the government's flagship program, Planting for Food and Jobs, has introduced an element which has catapulted seed industry into mainstream business in Ghana, making it possible for large quantities of seeds to be demanded and supplied across the country. We have been making very good progress until this year. The introduction, unfortunately, of the pandemic into West Africa has changed the ball game and really disturbed our smooth sailing into large-scale seed production. And we involved think that we need to take stock as to what is really happening to us in terms of the seed sector. What can we do to counteract the effect on the sector, and then make sure that going forward, we are able to take advantage where there's advantage to be taken and to minimize negative impacts which can derail our efforts. So in this case, we have assembled, as Foster has just said, a strong team to look at the various aspects. And I will be trying to make sure that we bring out the issues which are important to us and to you. And we hope that in due course, you will also be able to make a contribution towards our discussion. As has been already summarized, the pandemic has created a situation where we think input access is going to be affected to some extent, and uncertainties will be introduced as regard to planting schedules, planting plans, and so forth. You know, the thrust of our fight against the pandemic is to require stay at home, don't mingle, take some, solitary measures and so forth. These do not go with mass participation that we are used to in farming. So our discussions will focus firstly on how do we, as much as possible, bring about normal farming trends in spite of this without exposing ourselves to the health hazards that continue. We also know that there will be opportunities. Already you can see that there's a dramatic switch to the utilization of local produce. If we were to build on it, we will rather reverse the earlier trend of relegating our own production to the background and squatting on imported items. We will also discuss the issue of certified seed and why the demand for that is still a little bit low, in spite of its touted benefits to us. And we have excellent field operators who are going to bring out the issues so that we will see how, going forward, we position ourselves to continue our march into seed industry without having huge carryovers in our storages, which bring about a lot of losses to the industry. So I will not talk too much at this stage. I will only try to field contributions that will enable my colleagues to address issues of demand, of infrastructure, of knowledge, of extension, and particularly also how the flagship program of the government, PFJ, has positioned us at this time, and what disruptions are foreseen in the program going forward this year. I think we can all see already that there is an issue with the rains. The rains have delayed. You don't have to be a meteorological expert to know that. We are almost in June, and in the south at least, we see that we don't have very good rain yet. But are we poised to move when the rains come? Has there been some damage already? And what kind of remedial measures can we take? These are all issues which will be discussed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wobel. I told you, just get glued to your seat, and there are more to come. I wish Pops Dankwa is on the line because he's caught up in another program, but he will join us very soon. He's coming from the research background. So I'll give the floor again to the lead discussants to engage the other partners in a discussion, and each of them have 5 minutes to respond and react to the opening remark and the framing of the key discussant. So, Mr. Wobel, I give you the floor, and then you invite the discussant to respond.
Yeah. We will like to have Professor Dankwa a little bit later when he comes on board, so I'm reserving his questions, but definitely the seed value chain starts with variety development. Without the variety, there can be no seed. And Ghana has done very well with the variety research right from independence. And in fact, even before independence, the colonial administration relied on good varieties for their exploitation. And we have continued not for exploitation, but to take care of ourselves. Ghana varieties are important and famous all over the world. And now, with the incoming of the private sector, we also have very good hybrids coming up, mostly from external sources. but also made in Ghana hybrids are coming up now. A lot of them from Waki, Professor Danqua's outfit, and there are even private sector outputs which are coming up. So Ghana is on the move with these varieties. So the question is, for NASDAQ, how do you see the role of these varieties, and what do you think would be the challenge posed on your utilization of them in view of the COVID pandemic?
Thank you, Mr. Wardwell, and good morning and good afternoon again. I'm speaking on behalf of the private sector, seed producers and seed companies in Ghana. And I must say that, yes, it is true, a number of our members are really venturing into hybrid seed production, which is likely to transform the seed industry going forward. At least we have about 4 now. Antica Company Limited, IWAD is producing. We have also LCIC in Kofredi also producing hybrids with a few others. So local seed, hybrid seed production is really catching up. I think that with the introduction of or the pandemic coming into light, more people are going to see the relevance of producing hybrid seeds in this country, because we all can attest to it that yield per acre, looking at hybrid seed, far outweighs that of OPV. Even those who are fully glued to OPV production, gradually with the support from FAO and WACI, we've had some trainings for people who are really producing OPV, and they have really taken up the challenge to go into hybrid seed production this year. So COVID is coming to push us further to do what we have started doing, to do it better. So that's what I can say as an introductory aspect to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Augusta. May I provoke you just a little bit more, a few minutes devoted to how you think the hybrid introduction will cure the problem of low demand?
Farmers in the past have solely depended on OPVs, and some use the OPV, buy the OPV from the market to produce, and at the same time using their pharmacy seeds. They have come to notice that there is really not much difference in yields. So 1 year they will go for the hybrid, the next year they think that, well, I got the same yield as using my pharmacy seeds. So with the introduction of hybrid and all the other factors that come to it, I always say that it is not just the seed. Seed goes with other inputs, fertilizer, good agronomic practices. So with the hybrid, it goes with that before you can get the yield. We need to really work around the clock to get the farmers to, one, adopt the seed, and then look at other agronomic practices that will go into it to help them really improve their yields. And that is what I think hybrid can do to transform our seed industry and our productivity in general, so far as agriculture is concerned.
If I may come to Dr. Ansa Solomon, before I come to your main issues, I would like to see if you can add something to Augusta's contribution. Augusta has eloquently demonstrated that the influx of or the incoming of hybrid would enhance uptake of quality seeds. That is fine. But do you think there is something to be expected from extension role? Because we know that in recent times, the practice of demonstrations and trials at the village level has gone down, and farmers may not be very convinced about the products we are putting on the market. So what role do you think both your own directorate as well as extension what is the role they can play to make sure that we enhance demand?
Thank you very much. Well, extension is very key if you really want to increase productivity, so far as hybrid, as well as all other crops are concerned. And when we talk of this extension services, both private and then public extension services is needed. Like you said, we used to have a lot of demonstrations to show how crops will really do or perform in the past, but these days we are not having much of such demonstrations. So for me, I think the area that we may have to hammer to really make sure that farmers will really uptake the hybrids, it's e-extension, especially in the wake of COVID-19. We really have to intensify electronic extension services. In Ghana, we are not doing much. More has to be done so that farmers, an average farmer has a mobile phone. So I think basic information can really be even translated into the local language so that even the school children, those in secondary schools who are closer to their parents, will be able to relay this information to the farmers so that they can really practice it. And more so, one thing that is, of course, lowering the demand of hybrids is that most of the times when farmers go to the input shops and they buy the hybrids and they plant, they don't see the real difference between the hybrids and the OPVs, which means they have really gone for fake seeds. So faking of the seeds, in fact, is something that our regulatory agencies, as well as every stakeholder in the seed sector industry, will really have to work on. So that quality seeds, when we say hybrid, we have to add quality to it. We really have to qualify it. So that when the farmer goes to the input shop, he's sure of the seed that he's going to buy, so that the fertilizers and all the other things that we're using will be able to realize the productivity.
Thank you very much, Solomon. We know for sure that what you are saying has been recognized by the ministry, because in the PFJ program, we are aware that the seed is not acting alone. The seed is acting with the other inputs in the improved input package, that is fertilizer, plant protection, extension, and so forth. So let me move on now to the follow-up issue. That is, what is the current status of your PFJ program so far as, relationship with what is happening with under the pandemic is concerned?
Yeah, the Planting for Food and Jobs campaign, as you all know, started in 2017 and is still ongoing. What most people knew about Planting for Food and Jobs, the focus was on just food crops model. But now there are other 4 models in addition to the food crops model. And these models are planting for export and rural development. We have the rearing for food and jobs, where the focus is, of course, on livestock and poultry. We have the agriculture mechanization services model, where we want to make sure that we make farmers have access to subsidized implements, high health implements, I should say. The focus is all there in order to be able to prepare their lands very well. Then we have the greenhouse villages model. Well, now the focus is on the food crops model, and I'm tackling the main discussant's question. In fact, the food crops model is hinged on 5 pillars, and these 5 pillars are what is driving the model. We have access to subsidized certified seeds for farmers, access to subsidized fertilizers for farmers. That's the second pillar. Then giving extension service, quality extension services to farmers, then marketing of the produce, and last and not the least, support the PFJ by the usage of ICT. So the situation, so far as the seed is concerned in country under PFJ, as at mid-April 2020 is as follows. Well, the figures that I'm going to give now, let me sound a word of caution. We have major farming season in Ghana, especially the southern sector. We have 10 regions. In the southern sector, we have a major farming season. And then we have the minor farming season, which starts from around September there. Then in the northern regions, where we have 6 regions, there too we have about, their farming season is just about to start in June. So the figures that I'm giving you, we just started the farming season. You shouldn't be worried at all. We're still pushing the seeds. And all these figures that I'm giving to you, it means it has really reached the farmers and they have planted them. So long as the seed distribution for the various seeds that we are focusing on under PFD is concerned, that's maize, OPV, the maize hybrid, rice, groundnut, cowpea, soybean, and vegetables, we have targeted 29,496 metric tons, and so far we have distributed 3,399 metric tons, about 8.7%. That was as at mid-April 2020. I know for sure that a lot has really gone. Then when we talk of the fertilizers, the target was 412,000 metric tons, and so far, as at mid-April 2020, we have distributed about 34,048 metric tons. We are not worried at all. We know for sure that there have been a little bit of restrictions as a result of the partial lockdown. You know, because of that, we have really met with the seed companies, and they have assured us that definitely a lot of seeds are in country, which will be pushed. It's only the vegetables that we have some of them now coming in. But apart from that, I don't think we have a problem.
Thank you very much, Solomon. If I may just follow up a bit, you know that seed security is extremely important for every country. And there are many countries in Africa who have instituted emergency stock management for seed. In Ghana, it seems we are a bit late. I think the concept is already accepted in our policy document, and there are plans also in the National Seed Plan. May we know from you whether the coming of pandemic has prepared you to think along these lines to ensure that in due course we have a seed security program in this country?
Yeah, I think so. Seed security is very, very important. We are in the wake of the pandemic. We don't know whether it's going to intensify or it's going to be softened. In case such a thing is intensified, what do we do? And we don't have any seeds in stock. In fact, it has really prompted government that at any point in time, we should have some seeds that are secured to be used in times of disaster. And I believe government will put measures in place to make sure that we have seeds at all times to be used.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I think if we want to talk about the seed security or agricultural emergencies in general, there is no other authority better positioned to address it than FAO. I myself, I remember many, many years ago, I was actually involved in seed security measures, and I spent 4 years in Eritrea trying to address that issue. But now we have the authority himself here, my brother Ajay, would like to help us with the issue of, what kind of assistance we can expect for government in the light of not only the COVID-19 per se, but to position ourselves that we are never overwhelmed by any emergency which threatens our seed dispensation and the agricultural sector in general. Ajay.
Yeah, thank you very much, and a very good morning to all discussants and people online. I would say it is very, very important to have a kind of seed security in the country, also maintain the germplasm of our seeds. One important thing is to build the infrastructure, which is already being done. The private sector is being helped to develop its capacities to produce seeds, and then the certification authorities' capacities are also being built. I think what we need to do forward is to have a sustainable system that allows seed to be produced in a way that nobody is left behind. We have researchers, we have the breeders, we have the multipliers, we have the private sector. What do we do to allow them to cash in their efforts? What do we do to allow the average farmer to be able to work confidently to the seed input dealer and get seeds, even if he has money or he does not have money? So these are areas we think FU can support government with. Yesterday, I was talking to the WIA director, Madam Paulina Adi, concerning the vegetables, seeds for the vegetable. Looking at the COVID situation, our immune system has to be built. And then there's a lot of backyard farming coming on board. Now, the seeds for vegetables is an area that needs to be pushed. And she's engaging the regional directors of the different regions to see what will be their needs and see how we could support them in this area of seed. Because for COVID-19, the one way to fight it is to get ready to box it out if in any way it gets to you. So FAO is willing to continue to work with stakeholders, with OFA, with NAFTAG and other bodies to ensure that seeds are available, and then find a system that will assure the sustainability of the seed system or seed security in Ghana. Thank you, Prof.
My brother, we are not sure yet whether Professor Dankwa is online. Prof, if you are not online, may I take the liberty to just briefly address some of the issues?
Prof, are you online?
I think Prof is not online. We had in mind to have Prof contribute to the issues relating to variety development, release, registration, and so forth. The first issue was, what is the medium to long-term perspectives of the development and release of crop varieties, drawing lessons from COVID-19? The idea is that COVID-19 has brought to us the concept of emergencies and the need for every nation to prepare adequately to meet the emergency. It is often said that if one is regularly not bothered by emergencies, one is the most prepared for it. In other words, disasters wreak more havoc on countries which normally don't have disasters than countries which regularly have disasters. Ghana is fortunate that we normally are not plagued by disasters, and therefore we take life very easy. This pandemic poses responsibilities on our research people to make sure that we generate varieties in a manner that will make sure that our agriculture is never disrupted. And so Prof was going to address this issue of preparedness, but also he was to look at how this incident prepares us going forward. And I would like to submit that we are doing fine so far as variety research is concerned. I think recently there has been adequacy in public funding for research stations. I bear witness to it because of late I have signed into function more varieties than anybody has ever signed in my position in the past.
Prof is back online.
Yeah.
I think in the course of the discussion, something very interesting came up in the discussion from our colleague in FAO, and also referring to the Ghana seed law, the Plant and Fertilizer Act. It has enshrined in it so many things for private sector to participate. But for me, I think there's still a challenge. So with having the executive secretary of NASDAQ here, I want to give her the floor to really tell us the challenges that this COVID pose to his members, and then also the opportunities that they can provide to their members.
Correct.
Yeah, in the seed sector. So I think whilst we wait for Prof, I want to hear from Augusta. The private sector is very key.
Okay.
And George also said that the private sector is supposed to drive. Yeah, so I want to know.
Okay, thank you, Foster, and thank you, Mr. Wobil, and for this opportunity to speak again. Before I go mainly into COVID, I just want to say that, yes, some of these things are not affecting us in isolation. Climate change has drastically affected us this year. The year is an election year, therefore decisions in the agriculture generally, or the private sector, it's really hinged on some of these things in addition to COVID. So in outlining some of the impact of COVID on agriculture and especially the seed industry, I would want us to look at it vis-a-vis the other factors. So you can say that yes, it's COVID to some extent, but also there are other challenges. So the first thing I would like to say is about the timely delivery of the inputs across board. COVID came at a time when most of our seed companies were either trying to clean their seeds or preparing to import their seeds into the country. It really came up in March. The lockdown came up in March, and we're supposed to start producing, planting in March. So all these things came together. Now, the information we have gathered from the field so far is that most of the seeds we are expecting from outside could not come in, and people are still struggling to bring it in, especially for the vegetable seeds. Now, instead of putting it on a passenger flight, you have to now rent a flight to bring it, maybe DHL, and that is adding to the cost. One person said he's not even sure when the vegetable seed will land, because they are still thinking about the flight that will bring it in and the cost aspect. Cost difference is about 15 to 20% difference. Fortunately for the farmer, this company cannot translate the cost, the extra cost to the farmer, because he's selling it under PFG. Unfortunately for the seed company, he has to bear all these extra costs. So that is a huge impact. It means that production cost is increasing, profit margins are decreasing for that company this year. So that is one aspect of the challenge. The other one is that most people who were cleaning their seeds, they use labor, whether we like it or not. The final thing is done by human beings. And because of the lockdown and with COVID, they are not able to get the people to do the cleaning. Even picking in the field is a challenge. So to some extent, if we are not careful, quality may be compromised at a point in time. That is the other thing we have to be looking at. So labor is really a major challenge. In Upper East somewhere, one seed company uses about 150 women to do the final cleaning of the seed. Now he's getting only 25 people. Labor is seriously affected. When it comes to the general production, at this time we are getting to the peak. Most of our laborers for the south come from the north. Because of the lockdown and the restrictions, they are not able to move in. Again, for the north, most of the laborers come from Burkina Faso. We will be discussing some of the opportunities and how we can take advantage of these things. When you go to Upper West, somebody says he does 5,000 acres. Now he's doing just about 500 acres of seed. This will have, today we may not feel the impact, but next year what happens? So these are the things we are looking at. Again, if you invite people, PPRSD to the field or Seed Inspectorate Division to the field to inspect, people may be reluctant because of the restrictions. So the issue is, will we be able to really do what we want to do? Well, we need to really put some measures in place and see how we can really address some of these challenges. I'll stop here for now, and then if the other questions come, we can respond to them.
Thank you, Augusta. I think I will hand over to the key discussant, and once Professor Dankwa is back online. Prof, we have zillion questions for you to answer. We can hear you. Unmute, Prof. We can hear you. Oh, my goodness.
Okay, I think...
Prof, we can hear you. Okay, let's go ahead.
Yeah, I think trying to see if you can...
Yeah, we'll reserve these questions. We'll
fill the void.
I think we should move on.
I would like to contribute to the perspective of the National Seed Council on this issue. For example, the issue of medium to long-term perspectives on the development and release of crop varieties, drawing lessons from the pandemic. The council is actually...
I can't hear you, Prof.
The council is the last actor in the variety development and release process.
Okay, let me call
it. It is the council which arbitrates to ascertain the suitability of the new variety, and following that, to register and release it for use. We think that this is also a security issue.
Okay, we'll check.
So the council's work will be part of the security arrangement in Ghana to make sure that at all times we have suitable varieties in the system. We have of late taken note of concerns by stakeholders about the length of the process to release a variety and the cost of it. We are dialoguing with all concerned, and in due course, we will come up with abbreviated processes which will not compromise on the quality of the work we have to do, but will minimize the time it takes for new varieties to reach the market. In all these things, we think that we will need to have the researchers play a key role in making sure that they strike alliances with the private sector so that we will have a way of free releasing which will enable good varieties to be tested in the field even ahead of time for mass release, so that we can use it to hasten the speed of release. And the last issue in that area is, how does the private sector partner with the research to make sure that the financing of research is a little bit more amenable? Presently, agricultural research is almost entirely dependent on government coffers, and with so many competing demands, obviously something sometimes has to give, and research stations are always complaining about the insufficiency of budget. So we believe that there is opportunity for the private sector, especially the enhanced private sector, which we think in due course should be able to make enough money so that we can have the seed industry credibly seen as a money-making enterprise also, in which case all the people who have made it money-making should be able to partake in the largesse. In other words, the seed entrepreneur will make good money from the market, and consequently, the researcher who made it possible for the variety to be available on the market should also get a commensurate portion. And this will come about through royalty agreements with the private sector, which will enable the research people to generate enough internal funds to be able to finance their work. We do not anticipate that in the short term, this will completely replace government support, but to a large extent should go to enhance some kind of independence by the research stations and be able to...
Mr. Wobo, you've hit a very interesting topic around plant breeders' bill, getting support for breeders. I really want us to move to that area and find out because for me, coming back to that, I learned that farmers actually don't buy seed. They want the genetic gain that they'll get from the seed. And genetic gains don't come in a vacuum. It requires research. And so therefore, we need to invest in research. I would like to find out from FAO, how are they positioned in this case to support government in its policies around building vibrant research sector in the country to support the seed system? And also, he can address the plant breeders' bill. Do you think it's important for us to pursue this? And if it is, why has it taken too long? And how can we fast track it?
Thank you very much. I mean, when Professor Wobble was speaking, I was just nodding my head and I was saying, yes, he's hitting the nail right on the head. You know, we really have to make sure everybody, every player on the continuum is deriving value, is making profits, is making gains from whatever he or she is contributing. Once you leave a particular arena out, the system will collapse. Then government will continue with unsustainable measures to shore up the system. So for us in FAO, we are looking for a situation whereby a structure can be put in place, a structure that merges the commodity value chain and the seed value chain, if I can even merge them together and say they are one, such that our farmers, we know they want the seeds for free. But if based on the private sector players who are producing the seed, they can get their money through another structure that the farmers don't buy directly from them, linking this to the marketing of the commodities. So at the end, the farmer knows I'm going to take seed from certified company A, B, C, and D at this cost. But at the end of the day, when I harvest, there is this amount of produce I'm going to give, or this amount of money I'm going to pay off to the structure or the council. I know we're saying we're going to bring a national seed council, which we've not brought. And based from this council, they can now look at how we can support the seed breeders, the researchers, and continue to produce more improved varieties and support even the private sector in producing the seeds that we need and venturing into other areas. That would be more sustainable, that in the medium to long term. But for now, what we are doing through PFG is working in a way, but there is the need for us to institute that structure, and the policy provides us that room to do that one. On the plant breeders bill, I think there are entrenched positions, and people have different opinions about what the plant breeders bill is. Probably, I think there is a need to have the education to let people know what the plant breeders bill is. And if there is a section that people feel is really taking them to the ethical issues, probably we could remove that aspect. But I don't see a lot of ethical issues in the plant breeders bill, but it depends on the interpretation and the understanding. So I think there's a need for us to have this roundtable conference, get people on board, those who are opposing the plant breeders bill, get the proponents together, and let us judge and say, look, for the sake of Mother Ghana, we have to pass this. Look at Obatampa. It is used across Africa, even outside Africa. It was developed in Ghana. The scientists who developed this don't receive a cent from a kilogram of what is taken out of this country. And if this was certified and how would I call it, tagged to Ghana and to the scientists, Ghana will be receiving money, royalties from this particular seed. And this going forward, we should look at it this way. Foster, I hope I was able to answer, but I think the issue of the plant breeders bill has to there should be a dispassionate discussion on it for us to make a way forward.
Okay, thank you. What I'm gleaning from your submission is that we need to sensitize the stakeholders and for them to understand what the plant breeders bill is all about, so that they will understand and support its passage. Thank you so much. For me, recently, I'm coming back to the Minister of Food and Agriculture. If you permit me, Mr. Key discussant, first of all, recently we know that the bill, the law is in force. And recently we did a study to really track the challenges in the seed sector, in the seed system in Ghana. The TASAI index have highlighted some few areas that we need to look at. For me, COVID is here, but we need to build resilience for the next COVID, which I don't know the name. Yeah, I want to find out some of the key areas that they mentioned where we have a very weak seed platform, traders association. And so therefore, I want to also go back to NASDAQ to find out from NASDAQ whether NASDAQ is relevant. And if it is, how are we working towards sustaining NASDAQ and strengthening NASDAQ to play and address the gaps that the TASAI has identified?
Correct. That's a good point.
Thank you. NASDAQ is for the members, and without members, there is no NASDAQ. So anything we do is towards addressing the challenges or helping the companies find solutions to their problems. Mainly, one of the main problems we have, which we have also discussed with our counterparts in other countries, is about the traceability system in the country. At the moment, it is quite difficult to trace a particular seed to a company, even to the last farmer. So, for example, what we're going to do in that area is to see how we could build a system such that when you have your seed on the market and a farmer gets it, you'll be able to trace it. Then if there is a problem, we can really trace it to a specific seed company. And that is how we can improve quality of the seeds we are churning out in the country. The other thing is about digitization. COVID has come, and this is one of the opportunities we need to take to really build the platforms and digitize most of our activities as seed companies. So in this respect, NASDAQ looks at helping the seed companies, one, develop some of their products and put online, get an online platform where most of our companies can even advertise their seeds and give education to the farmers with the advantages and disadvantages of what they stand to gain in using their particular seed, in their specific seeds, so that companies will rather do businesses using this opportunity to promote their seed and their businesses. Thank you.
Thank you. I think, Mr. Mobile, you are the chairman of the National Seed Council. There's also been a discussion around this and saying that we have a very weak institutional architecture to drive our seed system. And being the chairman of the National Seed Council, I know Nigeria also have a National Seed Council. I really want you to educate me and my public and the public, general public, on this weak architectural institutional architecture and how you think Ghana should approach it and learn from its neighbors like Nigeria, also learn from other countries in East Africa and Southern Africa.
Thank you very much, Foster. The seed industry thrives on institutions conducting their roles individually so that collectively they're able to support the production of the final product, which is the quality seed. In Ghana, definitely we have the institutions, but there are many constraints, mostly born out of insufficiency of budgetary support, and then also lack of ill-defined mandates. So the council, of which I'm chair, has been trying to dialogue with all concerned to make sure that the mandates of all the institutions are adequately understood and then adequately respected and conducted. We are in the process of planning a major workshop, a facilitation workshop, which will try to make sure that we dialogue among ourselves so that all the actors along the value chain, from variety development and even before that, from genetic resources management to variety development to ADS production to certified seed production to quality assurance to seed conditioning to storage to marketing to utilization, and above all, under the umbrella of legislation and policy. We have seen in recent times, especially with the incoming of the private sector, there are all kinds of relationships which are emerging, which do not respect the rules along the value chain. You may find a researcher or a variety developer, for example, signing a contract for production of certified seed. This is not allowed by the law, So we want to be able to make sure we align to achieve proper discipline in the system. And Foster's concern about the institution is very, very accurate. And we want to make sure that Ghana, being one of the countries in Africa where the institutional arrangement for seed is almost like perfect. But it's the conduct of the institutions which is the problem. And we are going to move to make sure that these are addressed.
Thank you, sir. I think you touch on the issue of legislation and policy. And whilst we have the Deputy Director of Ministry of Food and Agriculture here, I really want to really poke him a little bit. For me, everybody wants to change his mobile phone almost every year or two, isn't it? Why do you think that farmers don't need new technology? So it means that when it comes to varietal release in Ghana, if you look at it, the average that the TASAI report indicated is 48 months, which is too long. Farmers can't wait to be using old technology, to wait for a new technology to come in 48 months. People are saying that can't we do a turnaround time to reduce these 48 months to almost about 24 months? So I know you sit on the varietal release committee. Could you please speak to that in terms of, because of policy, and you are coming from the right policy institution that really look at this policy. Also, I want to add another thing to your plate. There's a lot of regulatory environment issues that we need to deal with, especially private sector certification, quality control. I want you to quickly speak to that. You have just about two minutes to speak to that, because Prof. Dankwa has now joined us on the line, and so I'll give him some few minutes, and then I'll turn out to my other listeners on the line to listen to their questions and inform me. Yeah, quickly.
Yeah, I think with regards to the variety release that we are talking, you're saying that 48 months before it is released. Well, for me, I think the due process has to be done, because before you release a variety, as a researcher, you have to do it at least by your 2 seasons, you know. And we have the value for cultivation and use data that is supposed to be done, and then the distinctive uniformity and stability data. In fact, once you have this, then of course your variety can be inspected and then be released. But where we have a problem is that sometimes the researchers may have the data all right, but then monies will not even be there for the variety release committee to go and then visit the verification trials to have the varieties released. So that is where we have the problem. So I believe that if you have the seed sector support fund, you see, we can tap into this fund to really support, yes, this variety release process. And this one can really shorten the variety release process. Then regarding the quality control assurance by the private sector, I think this is very key. Still, I believe that once the private sector is producing bulk of the seeds, they have to be part, so far as quality control is concerned, so that they will be sure and be confident of whatever they are producing before the public sector will come in to even certify.
Thank you, Deputy Director Solomon. And I can see my colleague from FAO was shaking his head. I'll give you a minute to comment on this, and then I'll move on to Professor Dankwa. We are running out of time, guys.
Thank you very much. I mean, I looked at the varietal release. I remember, I think late last year, we were working with Dr. Solomon and the research institutes to see the varietal releases to be certified and make sure that they are registered. I want to believe that the process really needs to be vigorous in a way such that we don't get, it says that we'll get there and we'll say they are on the shelves. I've seen instances whereby there are a lot of varieties that have been released that are not even being used. You know, there is a need that when the variety is released, it has to be promoted. When Professor Wubley was talking about even the extension, showing how this works on the field, that one is not also there. So while I believe that the turnaround time might seem too long, I think we should focus our attention on the ones that have been released that are working very well, making sure that the farmers are making good use of it, and the farmers are using the improved seeds, hybrid seeds, and using it very well in association with other good agricultural practices and agronomic practices. For me, I'll put my efforts there, but we should not stop in making sure that we release more varieties that to speak to the needs, climate change, preference, human consumption preference, the issue of maybe the agroecological zones. You might have a variety that will work in a particular agroecological zone. Probably there's a need to refine it to work in another particular agroecological zone. So I agree with Dr. Solo, but I think we should focus more on getting our farmers to use the ones we've released already. Thank you.
Prof. Dankwa about, let's say, 5 minutes to make a submission. We are running out of time. Prof. Dankwa, please come online.
Yeah, hello.
Hello, Prof. Dankwa.
Yes, Mr. Foster Watson, thank you very much, and my sincere apologies for the challenges that we have had. I've been working with your IT for about an hour. We haven't been able to, but let me make a few comments. I haven't heard what has gone on, but the first thing I would like to say is that things cannot get better if we do not do things differently. We should remember that in the next decade, the population of Ghana is going to increase by about 7 million, taking the population to about 38 million people in this country. Already there are over 7 million Ghanaians who are very vulnerable. They earn less than $105 a day. The COVID-19 pandemic is a warning signal. What we do if something more catastrophic sets in tomorrow, in a year's time, in 2 years' time? You look at Ghana's overall strategy. That is the current strategy document 2018 to 2021. You find that there are very serious gaps. And we have to look at those gaps if we want to secure the future of this country. Number one, what we want to do, we want to ensure that our strategy, which has a vision of modernizing agriculture, has all the factors built in to ensure that we meet the expectations of farmers and markets. What we have to do is that our agriculture must be underpinned by science and technology. We are talking about certified seeds to farmers. Today you may have the certified seeds, but I want to ask the MOFA panelists, where will tomorrow's certified seeds come from when you don't put any funding into research? So we have to think about how research can be an important component of the national development strategy. If you look in the current document, you don't find any commitments to serious research to develop new varieties, which tomorrow come catastrophe, we can get all the seeds that we need in our country. Remember that COVID-19 or something more severe in the future has implications for the closure of all borders. Yeah. Assuming that all borders were closed and no seed can get to this country, what will Ghana do about seed? So we have to be self-reliant over the next 10 years. So that suggests that we need to do things differently. Business must be unusual. And the way we can do this, and I think that we need serious political will. I'm calling for a rethink to establish a national agriculture authority, which will comprise representatives from education, the ministry, from the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Environment, Science and Technology,
and would you think it will solve the problem?
Hello?
I think would that solve the problem? We still have National Seed Council. We haven't even found the way they're supposed to move the seed sector forward.
I'm moving forward.
Okay.
This National Agriculture Authority should access a National Agriculture Development Fund, which would be established with a minimum of 1% of GDP, because we say Ghana is an agricultural country. Yeah. We need to show that we are putting money into research. Because if we don't put money into research, we can't move forward. So I'm looking at this National Agriculture Authority accessing an agricultural fund to ensure that the value chains are properly developed.
Good.
But Mr. Watson, my key take-home messages are one, these are not normal times.
Sure.
And given that the COVID-19 pandemic is just a warning signal and there could be more devastating future events, Ghana should take its future into its own hands and transform its agriculture to secure the future of the country as well as drive socio-economic development. And this has implications for policy change and business unusual.
Good, good.
I want to say that what we need in this country is science, science, not just technology, Because the seeds we have today would be seeds in the garbage. We need modern seeds developed using the technology which makes them efficient and effective in farmers, and so that Prof, farmers can take the seeds and get what they want.
Prof, if I may, that doesn't mean that you also support the idea that farmers don't just buy seed, but they look for the genetic gain. And this genetic gain will only come out of research. So what is research going to do?
What research? Thank you very much. You see, they say that you can fool a farmer only once.
Okay.
Not the second time.
Exactly.
Not the second time.
Yeah.
What it means is that decisions made by scientists must be informed by the value chain.
Great.
Including farmers and the market.
Good.
It should be demand-led breeding. We cannot just do breeding. We have to know what the markets want, what the farmers want. And of course, we must put money into research, and we must constitute consortia comprising private sector and then the public sector, working for not only the markets, but also for the public good. Prof, because there are a number of crops that we have to invest for the public good of the country.
Prof, you've hit the nail right on the head. You hit it right on the head. And thank you. I'll come back to you for a wrap-up. But before then, I want to go to the line and attend to my other listeners who are on the line to post their questions on the webinar. And with your emails, we will respond to you. So the floor is open. I don't know if my president, Dr. Agnes Kalibata, is on the line. He can make a quick remark. Or my vice president, Aggie, is on the line. Fadel, my deputy president, Dr. Fadel, are you on the line? Hello, Nairobi? Dr. Fadel? Aggie? Okay. Now the floor is open for questions. Hello. Bringing their questions. Jane?
Yes, Foster, there are questions that have been posted on the Q&A. I can read just a few of them.
Yes, please go ahead.
The first question, there are many. I hope we can go through all of them. There is a question from Thierry, and he is asking, what are the mechanisms the seed sector actors are putting in place to build strong seed institutions in the public and private sector? What are the challenges?
Okay. I've seen one also from USAID, Gloria. Gloria's question is, what are the plans by the government of Ghana on financing mechanisms to directly support SMEs in the seed sector that may have been negatively impacted by COVID? So recently, government has put in place, what do you call it, stimulus package. We want to know how they are going to support SMEs who are into seed. So that's a question from Gloria. Okay, Jen, you can go ahead with some of the. We can take 3 questions and I'll let them quickly respond.
Okay, right. From Kwabena, he's asking, what is the volume of seeds produced in Ghana vis-a-vis imported, and what support has CSIR and the local seed companies received from stakeholders such as AGRA?
Okay, did you get a question? Okay, I'll like them to answer few ones, but we'll just, the others, they will definitely send a written response as we move along. Yeah. Yes. So first of all, yeah, go ahead. Who want to build the cat?
Yeah.
Okay.
The first one.
The first one
from Thierry. From theory, he is asking about building strong seed institutions, how we are going about it. The response is that in Ghana, we have collectively formulated and adopted a national seed policy supported by a national seed plan. And these two processes were conducted with all collaborators and all institutions participating. And so the mandate of each institution is already very well defined. I think the approach is that the budgetary support by government, as well as other support systems, even by the development partners, is tuned to the dictates expressed in these two documents. We also think we relate very closely all the time to institutions like FAO, IFAD, and so forth, who bring in a lot of international perspectives on how to do certain things better. So with all this, we give adequate guidance to make sure we support the development of institutions. But the problem often is that resources are never enough, and we think that institutions can best thrive if their products pay back to them to strengthen themselves. And so that is the approach we are taking, that the seed industry develops such profitability level that it is able to take care of the institutions which support it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do you want to pick the other question, and then we move on to a quick run-up, and then we summarize the recommendations, and then we move forward.
Okay.
Just quick. Yeah, that's about less than a minute.
Okay. With regards to the financing mechanism, what normally government does is that it supports only certified seed production. So far as the support is concerned, the certified seed production, you know, we have other classes of seeds, like the breeder seeds and the foundation seeds. So when government supports the companies to produce the certified seeds, then of course the monies that they will accrue from there, they will use it to buy the foundation seeds, and then the foundation seeds producers will use it to buy the breeder seeds.
Okay, fine. My Vice President Vanessa Adams on the line. He has the question is, seed alone is not enough. We need markets too. So NASDAQ, I want you to pick that one. Seed alone is not enough. We need markets. And since we are dealing with the private sector people.
Yeah, market for the seed, yes.
Who
is the market? It's the farmers.
Yeah.
And as long as they know that they can guarantee what they are selling or what they are buying, for example, the market will always be available. Again, we should be able to even go beyond our borders to sell our seeds within the volumes that we want, if and only if our quality is good. Because anybody will come in to say, I want to buy Ghana seed. Once they try it once and it is good. But so the market will always be there, depending on how we ourselves position ourselves with the kind of seed we are producing. So market will always be there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just want to give you just a few seconds to give me your parting note and recommendations. Quickly, your parting shots.
Well, I think that from the way things are going, whether we like it or not, some of the seed companies, seed producers will need some stimulus package to bounce back to business, to be able to really do good work. The other thing is that we have reduced the quantity of seed we are producing this year because of COVID, and then other factors coming in. What can we do to make sure that going forward or next year we don't get this thing really impacting on our agriculture? Can we be thinking immediately about some storage facilities that can keep these seeds, because that has been a major challenge? Can we get most of our companies also benefiting from the subsidy fertilizer, so that at least they're encouraged to produce more this year for the future, because the impact will be more in the future. The other positive thing I want to say is that there is good in everything that happens. And what I am seeing is that even though we are not able to get more laborers coming from other countries or from north to the south to support, we can take advantage of the students that are even sitting home. If they get them, if you employ them and they work 1 or 2 weeks in your field, they may be, you may be fighting their appetite towards it and production as a business in the future. And again, mechanization of our businesses.
Thank you. I'll go quickly to what do you call it, Benjamin on the line. Your parting shot, please, with some recommendation quickly.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, what I would say is the private sector should always produce for an identified market. And then the market should also be able to source for financing in the way that the private sector who produces the seed will not wait for too long. And then at the end of the day, the farmer who gets improved yield, makes money and is able to pay the seed producer. In all this, because the business model is good and strong, the banks may come in to support with some financial stimulus in the way that nobody will be left behind, including the breeder seeds and foundation seeds producers. When the other professor was talking, he was talking about us having the kind of a fund. I believe there could be a fund within the private sector that could support the seed system, irrespective of whether government is coming on board or not. And I'll be very happy to work with Professor Wobil to discuss this and see how this could be brought on board, as well as NASDAQ. Thank you.
I move on quickly to Solomon, your parting shot.
Yeah.
A few minutes.
I think my parting shot will really focus on maybe vegetable research. You know, we introduce a lot of vegetables into this system, and I believe that the one that we have a comparative advantage, we should be able to pump in money to really come out with the best varieties so that we can produce the seeds in country. And the same for hybrid seeds. Even though we have a lot of hybrid seeds which has been released in Ghana, yet the certified seeds production, in fact, the levels are very low. So we need to really intensify local production of hybrid seeds. Then regarding rice, we also import a lot of rice. And in the wake of COVID-19, you know, some of these our imported countries like Thailand and then USA, what of if they cut short of their exports? That means we are going to be in trouble. So what we need to do is to develop new lands. We have to develop new lands and irrigation, and of course, even expand our inland valleys for rice production. And realizing from the negative impact of COVID-19, MUFA is working out that's one I may have to say, to support additional 1.5 million farmers to have access to subsidized improved seeds and fertilizers.
Okay. All right. When are we going to put in a sustainable system to drive seed distribution and input distribution, and not to put heavy burden on government expenditure already? You don't need to respond to this. Let me quickly run to Professor Dankwa on the line. Prof, I need your parting shot.
Thank you very much, Mr. Boateng. My parting words are: one, Ghana's import bill 2019 was over $2 billion. We have to stop this in the medium term. What we should do is to develop a long-term strategy to fix the problem of importation, because tomorrow will come and we may not be able to import seed or, in fact, food crops from anywhere in the world. And so we have to be self-reliant, and that calls for doing business unusual, rolling out a strategy that will ensure that research is properly funded and value chains are strengthened, developed to ensure that we meet the expectations of farmers and markets in the medium term. By 2030, if we haven't fixed the food problems, it will mean that we didn't have the political will at all.
Great.
So
Thank
this is the time that we must show the political will by putting money into agriculture. Minimum 1% for agricultural research so that we can develop the industry in the shortest possible time.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you.
This is a good sermon, and I'm not going to church on Sunday. Okay, now I give the last word to my key main discussants. Also have about 3 minutes, 2 minutes to wrap it up.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Foster. This has been a good opportunity for us to take stock. Obviously, we are poised to go into another major season activity, which has delayed, but we are as ready as we could under the circumstances. And I will say that these points which have been generated from my colleagues and I definitely position us to look at key areas which need urgent attention if we are to succeed this year and be ready to move into the following years with more confidence. I must say at this stage that when the Plant and Fertilizer Act, which is the seed law more or less for the country, was introduced, that is Act 803, there was provision made for a seed development fund or a plant and fertilizer development fund, which is extremely important. And a few days ago, some of us had a chance to meet with the Minister of Food and Agriculture, who is solidly behind us to activate that fund. I think the activation of that fund will address a lot of the issues which we have addressed here. Because the fund is not a fund of government, it's a fund of the industry to be used to plug holes in all steps along the value chain. There's a provision for emergency issues like this and to build a seed security program for the country. There is also a provision for addressing studies and surveys, for motivating the private sector, and so forth. So we are very much encouraged by this action by the minister towards full establishment of this fund. And if we have any Ghanaian parliamentarians listening to us, we know that there are a few more hurdles to be overcome, and we look for their support to make sure that we achieve a good finality to this process. I think we are going to take advantage of the impact of COVID to strengthen ourselves. We want to take COVID-19 as a vaccination into our industry, to be fortified adequately to move into the future, knowing fully well that we are prepared to stand any emergency which might come to Ghana.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, my discussant, and thank you, Professor Dankwa, and everyone, Benjamin, and all those who are listening to us. I told you you are going to have a very interesting time, and we've shared ideas. I want to pick some few takeaway points. I think we still need to support and push government to, in terms of the stimulus package, look how best they can support SMEs that are in the agribusiness sector, and also seed as well. We also have come to realize that we need to build a very robust value chains so that everybody can make profit, and then there can be demand for seed, as have been outlined. We also need to learn that farmers don't just buy seed; they need genetic gains, and genetic gains come from research. And so, therefore, government should pay attention to research, no business as usual, and so that we'll be able to address our seed needs. Now to the graduates who are staying home. COVID-19 has provided opportunity for you to work on the fields of these seed companies. So you can go there and work on their fields. We have realized that with COVID-19, we need to hold fast to mechanization to improve labor productivity on the farm. Going forward, what I heard was like music into my ears by the council chair, saying that they are pushing government have accepted that they need to activate the seed and the fertilizer fund. And so we are appealing to parliamentarians, help us, you enact the laws, make sure that you push and track government and make sure that government really put money into this fund so that we can address all the numerous challenges that has been outlined this morning by our cherished and well esteemed panelists. On that note, I thank all of you for listening to me and taking time to also contribute with your questions. We'll respond to some of your questions in writing and send it to you. Thank you so much. Until we meet again, I'll say bye for now.